There's a specific kind of person who, when something breaks, a relationship, a plan, a situation they never saw coming, doesn't reach out. Not because nobody's available, not because they don't have people. They just don't reach out. They sit down, get quiet, and start working through it. Alone, methodically, and most of the time, they come out the other side completely fine. Which raises a question nobody seems to ask. What is actually happening inside that person's head while they're doing that? Developmental psychologists have studied something they call self-directed coping, the tendency to internalize problem-solving rather than seek external support. And what the research consistently points to is that this doesn't arrive fully formed in adulthood. It gets constructed, quietly, across years. For most people who solve things alone, there was an early environment where external support was either unpredictable or simply not there in the way a child needed it to be. Not necessarily a dramatic absence. Sometimes it was subtle. A parent who was physically present but emotionally somewhere else. A home where asking for help felt like adding to someone else's burden. A moment, or several, where a need was expressed and nothing reliable came back. The child doesn't analyze this. They adapt to it. The brain starts to reroute. Instead of sending the signal outward, it learns to process inward. And that rerouting, done enough times, eventually just becomes the default setting. By adulthood, it runs so automatically that the person doesn't even notice it happening. They just assume this is who they are. In real life, this pattern has a very specific texture. It's the person who will spend an entire evening watching tutorials, reading forums, and troubleshooting something step by step. Not because they can't ask for help, but because the idea of asking feels more uncomfortable than the problem itself. It's the person who went through something genuinely hard, a job loss, a health scare, a quiet kind of grief, and handled all of it internally. Showed up to work on Monday. Seemed okay. Was kind of okay. And nobody around them even knew anything had happened. It's the person who drafted a message asking for advice, read it back, and closed the app. Not once. Routinely. For years. These aren't isolated incidents. They're a pattern so deeply embedded it doesn't register as a choice anymore. It just feels like life. Like how things get done. And there's something else happening in these people cognitively that rarely gets talked about. Their internal processing is fast. Layered. They run through scenarios, outcomes, and responses in their own head with a level of detail most people would reserve for an actual conversation. Which means by the time something is worked through enough to share, it already feels finished. Bringing it to someone else feels almost unnecessary. Like reading someone the plot of a movie they weren't there to watch. So they don't. Or they try. And what comes out feels thin compared to what actually happened inside. And they'd rather say nothing than hand someone a pale version of something that mattered. Here's where it gets complicated. At some point, gradually, with no clear moment you could circle on a calendar, solving things alone stops being something this person does and starts being something this person is. I handle my own stuff. I don't really need much from people. Once that belief settles in, accepting help stops feeling optional. It starts feeling like a contradiction, like agreeing to something that conflicts with how they've learned to understand themselves. And that's a different kind of problem entirely. Because now it's not just a habit. It's an identity. And identities are much harder to update than habits. In relationships, this creates a gap that's difficult to explain and even harder to close. These people often care deeply, more than the people around them realize. But translating that care into vulnerability, into actually letting someone carry something with them, that step doesn't come naturally anymore. It has to be made deliberately, against a current that's been flowing in the other direction for a long time. The people who love them often sense this without being able to name it. There's warmth there, real warmth. But there's also this persistent feeling that something just past a certain point stays closed. That closeness is offered up to a line, and then something quiet pulls back. And the person on the inside knows that gap is there too. They're not blind to it. They just don't have a clear path across it from where they're standing. It's worth stopping here and saying clearly, this is not a portrait of damage. The person who learned to solve things alone built something real. A tolerance for discomfort that most people never develop. An ability to hold themselves steady when the situation is unstable and no one nearby fully understands what's happening. In a life that will, at some point, hand everyone a problem that no one else can fully solve for them. That capacity is genuinely valuable. The question worth sitting with is a smaller one than it might seem. Is this self-reliance being actively chosen right now by the adult in this body with full awareness? Or is it running on a program written decades ago, still protecting against circumstances that no longer exist? Because survival patterns don't come with an off switch. They don't check in. They just keep running because running is what they were built to do. The person who never asks for help didn't arrive here through a decision. They arrived here through repetition, through a slow accumulation of moments where reaching out didn't produce anything dependable. The brain registered that pattern and did exactly what brains are supposed to do. It adapted. It was trying to protect them. It just didn't know when to soften. The need for connection didn't disappear. It got quieter. It stopped asking out loud. But it's still there. The want for someone to just get it without a full explanation. To not have to rebuild the context every time. To let something be shared without it becoming complicated. That one is still running. It just learned to stay in the background. And the most important thing about a pattern that got learned, unlike a trait you're born with, is that learned things can be revisited. Not erased. Not undone overnight. But looked at clearly, with a little more understanding of where they came from and whether they still need to run the same way. That's a different kind of freedom than most people expect. And it tends to arrive quietly, the same way the pattern itself was built. If this video landed for you, the next one goes even deeper into why emotionally self-sufficient people often struggle specifically with receiving care, even when they genuinely want it. It's already up. I'll link it right here. And if you've been watching for a while and haven't subscribed yet, this channel is built around exactly these kinds of conversations. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.